Welcome, everyone. It looks like everyone has arrived. So we're really glad to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Maren Christensen Hofer, and I am a white woman with shoulder-length grayish hair sitting in a blue bedroom. I am the executive director for the Multicultural Autism Action Network. And on behalf of our organization and the Autism Society of Minnesota and the Minnesota Autistic Alliance, we're very happy to have you join us here. So welcome. We're going to get started for a couple of housekeeping items here. And first of all, I'd like to let everybody know that we have Somali and Oromo interpreters available. And if you would like to use those services, you simply click on the globe on the bottom of your screen, if you can find where that is. And then you should be able to choose which language you would like to listen in. There are Somali and Oromo interpreters in kind of two separate channels, two separate rooms. We also have ASL services available. And as you can see, our ASL interpreters are spotlighted. Thank you very much, Alan and Ashley, for being with us tonight. Hopefully everyone can see them, but if you're having any kind of technical problems or questions, please feel free to type a question in the chat or raise your hand. We've got a couple of folks helping us out from the Autism Society that will happy to make sure that we get things working for you. One other housekeeping item, I would just like to ask that everybody keep their microphone off during the discussion with our panelists. Just note that if your microphone does get turned on accidentally somehow, some of our hosts may turn it off for you just to make sure that we don't have any distraction or background noise. So please don't be offended if that happens. We're just trying to make sure that everybody has a good experience. And the first part of our discussion will be with our panelists, but please feel free to use the chat function for any questions as you think of them. We're planning on having some time at the end of our session for some questions, but please feel free to write questions or type questions in the chat as we go. So with those questions aside, I'd like to once again welcome you and welcome our guests tonight, who are Saeed, Che, Delia Samuel, and Jules Edwards, to whom I am so incredibly grateful for sharing your perspectives, your time, your experience, your wisdom with us. This event came about as really years of conversations about how to best serve autistic individuals in multicultural communities. And for me personally, as the parent of an autistic child, the answer is a really simple one, and that is spend time with autistic adults, get to know people, build relationships with them, hear what they have to say. And I know that I am definitely a better parent and probably a better person as a result of the friendships I have with autistic adults. So our hope here is to be able to extend that experience to our multicultural communities as well. We really wanted to make sure that people understand the importance of it and provide an opportunity to really elevate the voices of autistic adults in multicultural communities. So that's what brings us here today. So at this point in time, I'd really like to ask our three panelists to introduce themselves and get us started off. And Delia, would you be willing to kick us off with an introduction and introducing yourself?
Yes, Delia here. Good evening, everybody. I'm glad that you all could join us. So I'm Delia Samuel. I'm a Black woman. I'm wearing a red dress with a gold zip and a gold necklace with gold hoop earrings. My hair is black and it's pulled back in one. I'm in a room. To my left is a photograph and also a brown bookcase, and behind me is a curtain, and I'm wearing glasses and red lipstick. I am a mathematics professor, and I'm also the mother of two wonderful autistic boys. I am also an author. Of math textbooks, of course, but also the author of a book called Against the Odds, Inspiration for Parenting Children with Special Needs, which is really a recipe for parents, caregivers, or anyone who wants to know how to navigate the road of disabilities and how to make life work. It's a recipe filled with love, humor, and faith. And I am autistic, and I'm so proud to say that to you today. Diagnosed in August 2021.
Thank you so much, Delia. Saeed, would you like to go next and introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hello, everybody. My name is Saeed Shatia. You can call me Saeed. I am a Black man with a beard. And I'm wearing a blue bucket hat, some AirPods, and I'm in a room. Behind me is a, how would you describe that? It's some Arabic calligraphy as the painting, gold letters with a green background, and it's a verse from the Quran. I'm a writer, photographer. I just got my MFA degree from the University of Minnesota. Recovering addicts, former college dropout, rap fanatic, author. I wrote a book, an experimental memoir called Are You Borg Now? B-O-R-G, as in Borg, as in Star Trek, because I am a nerd. It's a experimental memoir that involves a self-interview technique between my adult self and my inner child. And we basically explore the various, traumas and experiences that we've had. By we, I mean me and my inner children, throughout my life, coming from Somalia to Kenya to Atlanta to Seattle, back to Somalia again as an adult, and here to Minnesota. It uses poetry, self-interview, nonfiction, photography, and original immigration documents that I scanned and uploaded to kind of tell that story from as many different perspectives as I could. The book did well, I think. It was released by a pretty small publisher, and it was a finalist for the Minnesota Book Award this year, which I was, alhamdulillah, very grateful for. And I'm autistic, gang. Almost coming up on close to a year now, since I've known. I think that's it. Freddie Gibbs.
Thank you, Saeed. Jules, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I'm Jules Edwards. I am a light-skinned Native woman with long brown hair, and I have a mauve headband on, and I'm wearing a mauve floral dress. So I'm an autistic adult. I'm a disability advocate and a writer and a parent of 3 disabled children. They are all autistic, among other things. And I do a lot of random advocacy stuff. And I'm noticing a pattern here. We're all writers. My book is not out yet, though. So I'm a little bit behind Delia and Saeed.
That's wonderful, Jules. Thank you for that. I think one of the reasons that we are so excited to have this conversation is because so much of the conversation about autism really focuses on children. And we're really honored to have your voices here as autistic adults. But I'm wondering if you're willing to tell us a little bit about the diagnostic process for you, what that was all about. And Delia, do you mind going first with that one?
Of course I can. Delia here again. So first of all, why was I diagnosed? Because I kind of suspected I was. I've always felt different as a child. But again, I did not know the word autism. But coming up here, having 2 autistic boys and having friends who are autistic adults, I began to look into myself, and I saw myself in my children. Some of the behaviors I saw in me. And so I said, I think I need to get tested. And so this is exactly what I did. I went to the Autism Society of Minnesota. I had a lot of paperwork, tons of paperwork. And I honestly had to go really deep into my life, into experiences that I would have preferred to forget, put it that way, because some of these experiences, and I have not shared a lot of these experiences with people, but they were really painful, especially when I was at high school, when I was ostracized and I felt so isolated because I felt different. So I had to go back into those painful experiences, and that was hard. Then my family members were interviewed. So my mother and one of my siblings, just to tell the psychologist exactly who I was as a child, what my behaviors were, what it was like to deal with me. And they told the psychologist as is. And so that was that ton of paperwork, and then the appointment. So I would say the appointment must have lasted between 2 and 3 hours. And if you thought that the paperwork really delved into my past, well, the questioning did that. But I spoke openly about who I am, about the experiences that I had, the pain that I went through, what I feel right now, my behaviors, you know, how I act, the inflexibility people see in me, and we can talk about that later. I mean, some of the things that make me autistic. But I spoke about that in detail with the psychologist, and afterwards, the psychologist said, it's as plain as day, you're autistic. And she classified me as autistic without intellectual impairment, without needing support. So that was the diagnosis for me.
Thank you for sharing that. Saeed, would you be willing to tell us a little bit about what prompted you to look at getting a diagnosis? What made you decide to go down that path?
Yeah, Saeed here. A friend came up to me and kind of pointed at me and said, "Hey, you're autistic." That's how it all started. Like, I'm not even joking. She just came up to me. Well, she was autistic herself, so it's a very autistic thing to do, you know. It was she had been observing me, you know, through interactions online and through, you know, text messages and stuff. And she told me when we met up in person for the first time, like, she asked me a couple of questions and she was like, "I'm 90% sure you're autistic." And I just didn't know what that meant. So I started asking questions and looking stuff up online. At first, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit hesitant and defensive. The thing about being autistic and being diagnosed later in life is you learn to mask at such an early age to survive mistreatment and bullying for being different or whatever, that you so effectively mask that you mask from yourself so that you don't even know your damn self, you know, like you don't realize who you are. Yeah, it's wild. Anyway, she told me that, and I have a history as a medical interpreter. When I worked as a medical interpreter at a children's hospital here in Minnesota, I would see a lot of high needs autistic kids come into, you know, various clinics, occupational therapy, physical therapy, etc. And I would be interpreting for their parents. And so I would be relaying the information back and forth. I ended up learning a fairly good amount about autism on the job, but I was only ever presented with like one specific iteration of what it could look like. And so I never really made the connection with myself. And then I just, started asking more questions and started researching more. And that led me to Twitter, where I learned a lot and had a lot of things confirmed by people who were self-diagnosed. And I was like, I felt confident enough, after like several weeks, maybe months of searching, that I could self-diagnose myself. I didn't want to rush into it. And then I needed, I kind of needed proof, because I'm always second guessing myself. I needed some type of evidence, I guess, like not also just for myself, but for other people, because people tend to gaslight you. And, there's a big problem of self-diagnosed autistic people not being believed because you need a formal diagnosis in order to be actually autistic. But this is not something you can pretend to be. This is not something you just casually walk into. Like it is what it is at the end of the day. So I went and did that largely for my own self edification, but also to push people off who would like push back against the self-diagnosis. And also because I needed accommodations at school. I was in my last year of the master's program and I was struggling, and they were trying to force me to go back to school in person, even though the pandemic was still going on. So I needed paperwork to let me continue doing what I was doing from the comfort of my home. Long story short, I eventually found somebody. It was very difficult to do, but I found somebody who was able to do the assessment for me. It was a 4-hour process. She also tested for ADHD, which I highly suspected. It was pretty painful, and honestly, I would not repeat it again. I wish I would have just accepted my self-diagnosis. And I've recently learned that there are a lot of other potential future drawbacks of getting the formal diagnosis. That are very unsavory, like not being able to immigrate to certain countries. If I end up needing mental health support and I end up in the hospital, whatever, it could be potentially used as a reason to hold me against my will. If I ever want to adopt children or have children of my own, it could, because I have that on my medical record, it could be used to, give me a hard time with that. But I wasn't worried about all that at the time. I just wanted some confirmation. And I went and I got it. It was very painful, and I got the results pretty much the same day. And then it took me like almost 2 weeks to recover from it, because the testing was really, really hard on the brain. Yeah. Then I got it. Yeah. And I was like, all right, cool. What do I do now? And now I'm here in this panel discussion.
And we're really glad that you are, Saeed. Thank you for sharing that experience. Could I just ask a quick question? I'm not sure that everyone is familiar with the concept of masking. Would you be willing to describe what that is if there are people in our listening that don't know that term?
Yeah, for sure. Masking basically is the act of suppressing your own innate urges, mannerisms, the way you speak, whatever, everything about you, from eye contact to speaking patterns to facial expressions, basically putting on a mask in order to fit in more with the culture at large, what we often refer to as neurotypical culture. Things like socializing, small talk, eye contact, smiling when you don't mean it. Those are things that are commonplace in most societies and cultures throughout the world. Being autistic, it is not necessarily something I find pleasure in or easy to do. I often have to force myself to make eye contact with people because I really don't like staring into people's eyeballs because it just feels like a weird thing to do. And the way I naturally speak is different. When I'm around people, I feel myself like turning on the charm and making jokes and doing all this other stuff that I probably normally wouldn't do, just because it makes me seem like I fit in more. And so that is like one way of masking. And we do that in an attempt to, just from my personal experience, like if you're the quiet guy in the room, if you're the one who's like not making eye contact with anyone, you're the one who's never laughing or smiling, even though you feel happy, then people are going to call you weird and make fun of you. And so you learn to put on that mask. That's my understanding of it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Jules, I'd like to come to you next just about the process of going through a diagnosis and what prompted you to do that and what your experience was like.
Thanks. This is Jules for the interpreters. I was also late diagnosed. I was in my early 30s. And it was because my children were going through the diagnostic process. They were kind of delayed in their diagnosis because I understood a lot of how they experienced life. So I would kind of brush things off like, oh, that's no big deal. I do that too. And I naturally accommodated a lot of their needs. So it didn't seem like they had any significant support needs. So as I was going through the evaluation for them, I was like, no, that's me. I do that too. Well, this is interesting. And I came to realize that I had been struggling because I'm autistic and I had no support at all. And I was masking a lot. And the way that I describe masking is like fake it till you make it, but you're never making it. So you're just doing the things that you're conditioned to do by social norms, even though they may not make sense. And even though you may not want to do them, you know that if you don't do the things that people want you to do, then you deal with ostracization. I can't pronounce that word. And there's a lot of bullying. And that's been described by a lot of autistic people as the universal experience is bullying, but it's so much different when you're a person of color, and it looks different and it's layered. So when I got my diagnosis, for me, it was a tool for me to understand why I was struggling so much with certain things. Because we dealt with homelessness and I had job instability and relationship difficulties. And it took me a while to realize that I'm like vulnerable in relationships. And that was really hard to reconcile with my knowledge about myself. I've always felt like I'm this really strong person and I'm really good at defending myself. I'm not. I try, but I'm not. And so that diagnosis was really helpful for me to understand what I need to do in order to live a safer life. So that's why I got a diagnosis.
Thank you for that, Jules. I think one of the things we wanted to talk a little bit about, and I think you all touched on this just a little bit, is, what was the reaction from your families, your community? What was the response when you shared the information about your diagnosis? And Delia, you're laughing. Why don't you take this one first?
Wow. So when I told my family first that I was going to be tested, that I think I am. Didi, you're not autistic. What makes you think you have that? Or you have a PhD. PhDs don't have autism. Listen to me. You're not autistic. Why are you wasting your time? So that was that. And then a very good friend of mine who's autistic herself, when I told her that I was going to be tested, and another good friend of mine, we were at dinner and they told me, yes, we believe you're autistic and that's fine. So I was tested, I was diagnosed, and then I called back my family and I told them, I am autistic. And the reactions were just beautiful. My mother said to me, I've been looking at this the wrong way. I didn't understand what it is. If you are autistic, then that's okay. That's okay. And then my brother took a long time to respond. He's my older brother. And then finally, when he responded, he said the same thing that my mother said. But he says, why are we calling autism a disease then? Why are we calling it a disorder? I look at you and what you have made of yourself. She says, then autism has to be a good thing. Why are we saying it is bad? That is what they told me, you know? And then other people, by the way, I haven't told many people, and there's a reason for that. But other people that I have told look at me and, you don't look autistic. Now, you have to tell me, what the heck does that mean? Seriously? How are we supposed to look? You know? I just don't understand that. And another one would say, but there's nothing wrong with you. There are two things that I don't like, two phrases. You don't look autistic, or something is wrong with you. This I don't like to hear at all. So when they say, there's nothing wrong with you. I said, don't say that to me. There's nothing that autism is a good thing. Don't say that there is something wrong with people who have autism. So these are the reactions that I got from persons. And but my family really, really, really supportive. Oh, I forgot my son, my 16-year-old. So I went to him and I said, Earl, you know you're autistic, right? And he says, yes, mommy, I know I'm autistic. And I said, guess who else is autistic? And then he starts rattling off names. I said, I give you 3 guesses. Well, he guessed incorrectly. So I said, oh, I am autistic. Your mommy is autistic. And he said, yay, mommy, you are autistic. Mommy, that's so beautiful. Oh, mommy, I'm so happy that you are autistic. Thank you, mommy. Thank you. Oh, this just melted my heart.
Thank you, Delia. That's wow. If only every family had that kind of response and that kind of warmth. Saeed, that's a tough act to follow.
I forgot one thing, Maren. I forgot my husband. He's the one I should have said first, right? He said to me when I told him that, he says, well, that doesn't change anything for me. That's okay. I thought I'd add that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Saeed, how about your experience when I assume that you shared your diagnosis with your family and your community. What was their response like?
Saeed here. Yo, that's funny. I just that your son sounds dope. That really made my day. Yeah, I shared with strangers before I shared with my family because I wasn't quite sure how they take it. You know, being Somali, we don't do too well with these types of things typically. It's a trend. You know, it's a lot. It's like Delia, like your husband said, it doesn't change anything for him, all right? And it doesn't change anything about you. You're still gonna be the same person you've been your whole life. Now it's just a different way to understand it. But for me, I write a lot and I share what I write a lot, usually on Facebook or on my blog. And so I just started talking about it a lot. And then I started like writing articles about it. And so like people within my community, like people within the Minneapolis area, and specifically like Somali people within the Minneapolis area, started hearing about it. So I'm pretty sure my family heard about it through word of mouth because we're the most gossiping people on the face of the earth. I swear to God, I remember one time when we lived back home in 2015. I was going from my house with a family. Me and my whole family moved down to Somalia for a while, and I was running down to the basketball court. And I was literally like running down the street, and it's like taboo to run in Somalia unless you're being chased. It's just not something you do. So I'm just running down the street casually, and everyone is thinking I'm a crazy person. And so I get a phone call mid-run. I pick up my phone. I'm like, I stop. I'm like, hello, Mom, what's up? And she's like, what are you doing running? And I'm like, what? And she, I just got a call. Somebody said you're being chased because that's the only reason you must be running through the middle of the street. I was like, hold on, bro. So word travels fast in our community is what I'm trying to say. So I'm pretty sure my family knew, but I really only recently told my mom like about 3 weeks ago. Yeah, because they were getting ready to go on a long trip, and my mom wanted me to come down there, and because they live in a different town, she wanted me to grab her and the rest of the family and all their suitcases and drive them up to the airport, like in the middle of the night. And it's like a long drive, and long drives really tire me out. And it was going to be a lot of socializing. We were going to stop by, you know, extended families' houses and get some food and small talk and chat. I already knew my social batteries would have been in the gutter. I would have been down for at least a week and a half. But I wanted to do it. You know, I want to be there for my family. I wanted to give them rides to the airport. So I was like, Mom, I can't. I'm sorry. And she was like, why not? It's not that far. It's only 3 hours round trip. And I was like, yeah. And then I thought about it. I was like, hey, yo, this is a perfect way to disclose autism to my mom. And I had known for like almost a year at this point. So I was like, straight up, like, listen, I'm autistic. And she's like, what do you mean by that? And we have a cousin. I have a cousin who's like very high needs autistic, like has a lot of support needs. And so that is probably my mom's like first image that she thought of, like, you know, that is not how you present. So how could you be autistic? She didn't push back or anything. She just wanted some explanation. And I was just like, oh, straight up. So this is kind of what it means. And this is how I found out. And this is the reason why I'm telling you this, because I know that it would, like, long drives really tire me out. Spending a lot of time with large groups of people really tires me out. Socializing, even with people I care about, like, dearly, really tires me out. And when I say tired, I don't mean, oh, I'm kind of tired. I mean, like, I'm going to need 2 days to recover from this, and I will be physically and mentally shut down. I will not be capable of making speech. I will not be able to do anything around the house. I'll just kind of be, you know, more or less laying in bed, you know? And once I explained that to her, she was like, oh, all right, I didn't know. Thanks for telling me. It's all right, we have lots of cousins. I'll find somebody to take me. And she did. And it was great, you know? And then when they came up here before they went to the airport, and went and got dinner with them, you know, as much as I could, and sent them on their way. And that was that. It was very painless. So I'm very happy for that. Yeah, that was my experience.
Thank you for that, Saeed. It's so nice to hear these stories just about normalizing sharing a diagnosis. And if, you know, of course, it's up to each individual how they go about doing that. But Jules, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you a slightly different question that we hear a lot in the autism community. And that is, when we hear these stories, oftentimes people will say something like, you know, but you're not like my kid. You're different from my child's support needs. And so this doesn't really apply. How would you respond to someone that's thinking that or has that question in their mind?
I would like to respond by giving them the up and down and saying, you're not like my child either. But that doesn't work very well. So you're right. I'm not like anyone else's child because I'm an adult. I've had over 30 years to learn, grow, and become the person that I am today. And parents need to give their children the same opportunity and trust their children to develop on their own schedule. Prejudice teaches us to lump people with a shared characteristic together, that somebody who share a characteristic are all the same, and autistic people are not all the same. So just like no adult is the same as any child, I mean, of course, that's going to apply when the people are autistic as well. But yeah, also please don't say that to autistic people because it's kind of silly. And it perpetuates this idea that autistic people are forever children. And I say that really intentionally because there are people who infantilize disabled people. That means they treat disabled people like they're children or infants, and that attitude is used to like deprive us of the right to make decisions for ourselves and live our lives the way that we want to. So we really need to separate this idea that autism only impacts children and parents, because autistic children grow up to be autistic adults.
And that's a big part of why we're here today. So thank you for that. You know, again, one of the things that we were kind of thinking about when we were putting this event together is some of the specific challenges of being an autistic person in a multicultural community, and those, the uniqueness of intersecting identities. And I know, you know, I've talked with all of you at some point in time about how diversity, equity, and inclusion is a big, you know, kind of buzzword, for lack of better term right now. And a lot of people are thinking about it, but it's pretty rare to find folks that are talking about those intersecting identities, like being both a person with a disability and from a multicultural community. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like for you? And Delia, I'm going to have you kick it off again here.
Delia here. So I'm a Black woman, and I also call myself Caribbean American because I am originally from the Caribbean. In my culture, in my community, if you have a disability, something is wrong with you. If you're autistic, something is wrong with you. So there is a stigma about disability in our community. When I first learned that my children were autistic, I felt I was being cursed. I felt that God was punishing me for things that I had done in my life. And that is because of the culture. I felt guilty. I felt that something was wrong with me. In my culture, disabled persons are ridiculed, called names, ostracized, set apart. We cannot be part of certain events, certain experiences, because we need to be fixed. You know, something is wrong with us. So that's the kind of community we live in. So we live isolated lives. My children, I protect them from negativity quite a lot, because this is how we as Black people are treated. And I remember even as a child, when I felt different, not knowing that I was autistic, I was so ostracized. I was so isolated. I felt so alone. I longed to be accepted. I could not fit in, but I just longed for somebody to understand me. Now, I am a Black woman living in Minnesota. As a Black person, we are the ones who are followed around in stores. We are the ones who are profiled. Do you know how many times I have gone to the grocery store? Before I exit with my parcels, I've been stopped and said, "Ma'am, I don't think you checked all the groceries that are in your bag." That has happened to me on many occasions. We are the ones, and that has happened to me when I once say let's say I want to go into a store and I want some gum. And of course, I've been followed around, of course. So I ask, "Where is the gum?" We are the ones that are brought to the gum, where the gum is, and they would tell me, "Okay, I think you want the cheapest gum, so get the cheapest gum." So as a Black person, we are already made to feel less. Pair this with autism. That is hard. With my children, do you know how many times I have been asked to leave the stores? Do you know how many times you could see by the look on people's faces, frowning at me, make me feel that I am a bad parent. Mom, your son is hungry. Why don't you take them home? You know how many times I've had to run home, leave parties with my children? As a Black woman, I am made to feel stupid. And do you know when the people's view change? When they hear I have a PhD. It's just amazing. It happens all the time. And especially with my children, when I go to a pediatrician, they would speak to me in the simplest language that you would talk to possibly a 1-year-old. And I'm thinking, why are you speaking to me that way? Then somewhere along the line in the conversation, maybe they would ask me what I do, you know, and they would hear that I'm a math professor. Oh, then you have a master's degree? I said, no, I have a PhD in mathematics. Oh, then you must be, you're a smart woman. Then they would take all the charts, and then the language would change and then the big words would change. Why? Because they see me, they judge me. As soon as they see who I am, they judge me and they make assumptions about me and about my children. I'm also a Black female who's a mathematician. Females and mathematicians don't really go together, you know, in the mathematics world. Yeah? There are lots of mathematicians who feel that there should not be females in that profession. So I have encountered subtle racism in the places where I work because I'm a Black female mathematician. Pair this with autism. A Black female autistic mathematician. I'd be ostracized even more. I don't belong. I need fixing.
Thank you for that, Delia. I have no words. I mean, we've talked about this before, and I don't know, the anger that I feel when I hear about the way people have treated you, I don't know what to do with it. But I am really grateful to you for sharing that with us so that people can get a little sense of what this feels like in your shoes. So thank you for that. Saeed, I'm going to ask you the same question about autism in the Somali community and what your experience is. Oops, or maybe.
Oh, yeah. Saeed here. Yeah, no.
I can come back to
getting
you.
Heavy. No, I'm here. I was just grabbing something. Actually, yeah, can you come back to me? Can you go to Jules real quick?
Sure, we can do that. Jules, do you mind answering that same question?
Sure. So in the Native community, we don't have a word for disability, and we most certainly don't have a word for autism specifically. And so we live under these colonial systems with languages that aren't our own. And we're misdiagnosed because autism as a label, as a diagnosis, doesn't exist for us. Our children are diagnosed with an F at the beginning. So instead of autism spectrum disorder, they label our children with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, which is a way that they can point the finger at the mother, avoid taking responsibility for providing services to children, remove children from their homes. And that's just the beginning of our lives. We have, Minnesota participates in something called the Adhd study, and I can't remember what it stands for, but it's essentially a monitoring program to almost do a census of autistic people. And they look at autistic people by geography and race, and they look at 8-year-olds. And Minnesota has, a decent size Native population. But in the entire Minnesota area that they surveyed, they only found 4 autistic children diagnosed. And there's a lot more, but we're not identified and we're not supported. And our kids are struggling, and the parents and the families are struggling. And then our kids are removed and put into foster homes or group homes, disempowered. Minnesota has the highest rate of out-of-home placement for Native children in the entire country. Our babies are being stolen left and right, and our families aren't getting the prevention support that we need, the disability support we need. And it really targets disabled children, because 40% of children in out-of-home placement have a disability, whether it's autism or something else. And it could be prevented, but it doesn't happen. And that's just the beginning of our lives. And we know that 90% of girls with developmental disability will be sexually assaulted in their lifetime. 49% will be sexually assaulted 10 or more times in their lifetime. We also know that Native girls and women are vulnerable to predators, mostly men who are not Native. And when you combine that, Native girls don't stand a chance of safety. We don't stand a chance. And that's just the beginning. And then you make it to adulthood and you're potentially dealing with addiction or homelessness or joblessness or all of the other systemic problems that people have to deal with. And we still have no idea, because we don't have knowledge about autism in our communities and we don't know how to support that. So I'm one of the very few Native women who are diagnosed. There are not many of us, and it feels really isolating and lonely. And it shouldn't be that way, because Native people are supposed to have strong communities. That's our culture, is being tied to one another and having reciprocal relationships. Well, how can you do that when you're alone? And it's just really hard to be alone in who you are, and there's so few of us. So that's just kind of a starting point.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Jules. I think, I mean, you're highlighting how our systems are set up to kind of keep people segregated and keep people apart, and identify different groups of people differently. And we've talked a lot about, what some of the barriers are for identification. Are there things that you would like to see changed? If you could wave a magic wand today, that you would really like to see us take action on? Put you on the spot here on this one.
Are you asking me specifically what would I change? I would change the conversation. And that's what we're doing tonight, is talking about what is autism in real life in our communities. And it looks like happy flapping children at the playground and playing outside a lot, and a lot of water. Water is a sensory regulation tool for a lot of us. But really starting from the beginning of our lives, having this idea that disability is just a natural part of life. We have so much ableism that we all have to cope with every single day. And sometimes it's very subtle and sometimes it's very obvious, but it's still there every single day.
Can I stop you for just a minute? And I'm not sure that everybody listening knows what ableism is. Could you give us a little definition of that?
Gosh, yeah, ableism is discrimination based on disability. And it can be a person's actual disability or a perceived disability. A person does not have to be disabled to experience ableism, but it's really a negative perception of what disability is. And hopefully that explains it.
Yeah, thank you for that. I just want to make sure that everybody is familiar with that term. Saeed, I'm going to turn to you again to talk a little bit about, the intersection of race and disability and what that looks like in the Somali community. What would you want, your community to know about autism, or what do you think are the misperceptions?
First of all, I just want to say I am having a bit of a difficult time at this present moment. The conversation topic got
If you need to pass, that's
very
okay.
heavy. I want to, but I also want to say something. I'll just keep it brief, I guess. It's hard. It's very difficult. It is difficult, as Delia and Jules both shared in their experiences and their perspectives for their respective communities. It is exceedingly difficult to be an outsider in this country, because exclusion is not just a means to keep people impoverished, but it leads to death for everyone but the majority, the so-called majority in this country. And I think my community has a long way to go in terms of healing, but I don't want to place blame on my community for not healing, because the things that we need healing from were not necessarily our fault. None of us in this room, as far as I can tell, asked to be in America. And we all came here in various ways. Many of us against our will. Many of us were born here and saw that the land which was supposed to be ours was taken from us. And so I think there are universal themes to all of our experiences. And I think autism is what brought us here together today, but also hardship and trauma and pain. I think that the number of Somali people who are autistic but are unaware of it is extremely high. And I also think that as the years go on, that number will go down because more of those people will see themselves as being autistic. And like Jules said, it is lonely. It's lonely to be at the forefront. We see a lot of content online about raise awareness this and be proud of that, but people don't talk about the cost of doing that. It's almost like Atlas with the world on your shoulders. And, it's not easy being the first one through the door. We praise people like Jackie Robinson for breaking barriers and opening doors, but rarely do we talk about the cost. so that those after us can walk through those doors. We sacrifice our bodies. Those doors are held open with our bodies often, too often. And I think we're going to be okay eventually. But there is a lot of pain between here and there. But it's like being alive. What other choice do we have but to keep moving? Yeah.
Thank you for that, Saeed. I'm grateful for your poetry and again sharing this experience. I'm hopeful that if there are other people out there that may be thinking that they are autistic and maybe contemplating a diagnosis, I'm wondering what you would say to them and what advice you would have for them, what you would want them to know. Delia, do you want to start us off with that question?
If you suspect that you are autistic, get tested. Maren, I wish one of the things I would love to change is the meaning of the word autism. There's so much negativity associated with that word. Just the way it is defined in there. What do you call this? What do you call this again? The
DSM-5?
Oh, goodness me. Disorder. What other words again? Give me another word.
Deficit, deviation.
My goodness. All of this, I would shy away from getting the diagnosis just by thinking of that. Think of autism as a way of life, as a different path, So this is my dream. But apart from that, if you think you are autistic, get tested and know this. There is nothing wrong with you. You do not need fixing. You are beautiful. And getting tested and knowing that you're autistic gives you a deeper awareness of who you are. You accept yourself more. You love yourself even more. You can give of yourself even more because you accept yourself. And it's okay. It's okay. You make no apologies anymore for who you are. And all of the masking, all of the pretending, why do that? That just goes out the door because you're autistic. Just be, and it's okay to be. And surround yourself with people who will allow you to be and to be who you are and to grow into the best autistic person that you can be. So don't shy away from a diagnosis. I think if anybody suspects that they are autistic, you speak to an autistic person. Get their view so that you can get the strength and the willpower to proceed. It's okay. It's okay.
Thank you for that, Delia. Jules, I know this is the conversation that you've actually had with many people. So I'm going to ask you the same question about your advice. If someone suspects that they are autistic, what would you want them to think about or know?
Yeah, I would say the biggest barrier to an accurate diagnosis is people not understanding what autism is and isn't. Because there's so much misinformation and stigma. And what people need to understand is that autism is a social, communication, and sensory disability but it's diagnosed based on observable behaviors, and it's not diagnosed on a person's internal experience. So a lot of times, especially if you mask a lot, people won't know because they diagnose based on observable behaviors, even though autism is not a behavioral disability. So learning about what is it like to be an autistic person? What is that experience? And I know that we don't like how the DSM talks about autism. It's super like negative and deficit based, but reviewing that diagnostic criteria and looking at resources online. I have a series on my Facebook page called Autism Moon, and it has several posts that help describe what is autism, and it describes the diagnostic criteria and what that looks like in real life. Because sometimes the words that they use in the DSM, they don't make sense in real life, especially for autistic people who might be literal thinkers. So that, like, really understanding it and understanding how you fit in to that criteria and how you may not fit into that criteria. But when I went in for my evaluation, I had a spreadsheet. It was the most autistic way to ask for an autism evaluation ever. I had a spreadsheet of, this is what is consistent, this is what is not consistent, what do you think? But we also have to remember that people of color have a really hard time getting an accurate diagnosis so much of the time because of racism, because of ableism, and that combined racialized ableism. I also have ADHD, and so I take medication for that. I take Ritalin, and a few years ago, I went to a new psychiatrist because I had moved. But like, you have to get a new doctor when you move because it was so far away. And I went in there and he told me that I was weird and that he wanted to drug test me. And he wasn't going to prescribe my meds that I've been taking for decades until I passed a drug test. And that is that racialized ableism, because I know for a fact that he did not drug test the white man that I know went to see him as a client, even though he's weirder than me. And I say that because I can, and he is. But that was just one example of that. So when disabled people of color, when autistic people of color go in for an evaluation, a lot of the time you're not going to get an accurate diagnosis. And that's the reality. And as much as we'd like to say, you know, go in and get an evaluation and get a diagnosis, like, it's not that easy for a lot of people. So one recommendation is find out from community members, where did they go? Who do they recommend? Because there are certain clinics and doctors in Minnesota specifically that I feel comfortable referring people of color to. And there are places that I would, nope, that's fine for a white person, but you don't want to go there. So it's really complex for a lot of us. And also, self-identification is valid. If you're like, yeah, I really recognize a lot of these autistic traits in myself, but you can't access the diagnosis because of financial barriers, because of racist barriers in the healthcare system, like, your self-identification is valid. And that's okay to say, this is a problem that I experience or a barrier that I experience, and these are the supports that I need in order to be successful in this way, or this is what I need to change for me specifically. And that's okay. A lot of the time you don't need a formal diagnosis for that. So yeah.
Thank you for that, Jules. Saeed, if you're open to it, I'm wondering if I could ask you the same question, and specifically if there's anything that you learned about yourself as a result of your diagnosis.
Can you repeat the original question too?
Just what your advice would be to someone who's considering getting a diagnosis or thinking that they might be autistic and pondering it?
Mm,
As much or as little you're comfortable sharing too.
yeah. I I think research, do your research, read up on it, speak with autistic people. We're online, bro. We don't like being, we're not outside, we're inside. Like we inside online. So find us online and speak with us and ask us questions and read up on it. There's plenty of literature throughout the internet from firsthand experiences of autistic people. And that was my best resource. I trust autistic people who are experts of their own lived experience more than I trust an academic who has studied autism their whole lives, because they're an outside observer. Not to discount what they do, but they will never in a million years know what it's like to wake up autistic, and live through the world every day as such. If you wish to seek diagnosis, formal or informal, that's your choice. Be informed. Look into it. It's going to be really challenging to get the actual formal diagnosis. So make sure it's something you really want, because you got to jump through a lot of hoops, fam. It is not fun at all. Insurance largely does not cover ADHD testing, and they're very specific about autistic testing. And even if they cover it, you're still going to have to pay a lot out of pocket. So be prepared for the financial aspects of it, and prepare yourself mentally and emotionally too, because by the time you work up the courage to get an actual formal diagnosis, you probably already know whether you're autistic or not. Like if you suspect it and you do some research and everything just keeps saying, oh my God, I've been doing that my whole life. Oh my God, that's me too. Oh wow, I didn't know that. Like chances are, like, dog, you're autistic, bro. Like it is what it is. Like don't fight it. But I understand the need to get that confirmation. And yeah, it's I remember the day I got the actual diagnosis. A friend of mine was with me to go do the testing. And she told me, like, once I got my results and I told her, she was like, yeah, I knew that's what they were gonna say. And I was like, oh, so why did you go with me if you already knew? And she's like, I just wanted to support you, and also you needed to know for yourself, right? I was like, oh, word, that's real, But also, like, if you know, trust me, it's not very hard. But it can be confusing, and you can have a lot of questions. Damn, I was gonna say one more thing. Right. The emotional weight of it, when I got the actual news, at first it was like extreme relief, because I did like a Zoom call with the therapist lady after the fact. And then just like dread and depression, and like I was not expecting that because I already knew I was autistic. I think what threw me off was like also finding out I had ADHD, because I wasn't expecting that. But like it just kind of, this ties into your second question, Marin. It was like, what does this mean for me as a person? What does this mean for my life? Then you start reading up stupid literature that says autistic people on average die 20 years younger. I don't know how much I believe in that anymore. Yeah, that average is largely brought down by, young children who die in accidents. But also at the same time, like the data is inconclusive. And I'm suspecting any research that we have out there right now that's done by non-autistic people is probably going to be flawed in significant ways, because they don't understand the internal mechanisms. They don't understand what's handed to us, like they don't understand our experiences. They just see things from the outside. And that's not enough. You need more depth. And I guess like to kind of sum it up briefly is like how it changed me. I have this tendency to hyperfixate on new pieces of information about myself. I'm always looking for new pieces of information about myself, but when I find them, I focus on them. Like before I got my autism diagnosis, I was misdiagnosed as a lot of things, a whole lot. But one of the things that was most damaging, I was misdiagnosed as having borderline personality disorder. Let me tell you, 1 year of my life, I was running around public Facebook posts. Y'all don't know what it's like to live with BPD, and you know what I mean? Like I was dating, and within the first like instance of meeting someone, I would straight up tell her, oh, by the way, I have borderline personality disorder. And then I would wonder why the relationship didn't work out. You know what I mean? Like, it's very funny, but not. And you know, that did a lot of harm to me because I bought into it, and I wasn't suicidal, but then I read somewhere that BPD comes with a lot of suicide ideation. And so I was like, wait, is it just gonna come up like the boogeyman is just jump me and I'm having a perfectly normal time, and all of a sudden, oh, you're borderline, now you're suicidal, because that's what the literature says. So I super focused on it, which is, you know, an autistic trait or whatever. But like I did the same thing when I got with autism, like formal diagnosis, and I started like really leaning into that identity and really like, you know, I'm sensitive to light and noise, but then now I started thinking about it more. How sensitive am I? To the point where I think I might have made myself more sensitive than I actually am, just to, I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say. But like it's a complicated thing. And I have friends who have been diagnosed in adulthood and who are like 5-10 years removed from that initial diagnosis. And with time, you get more understanding, because initially what you're going to do is try to understand your entire life through the framework of, okay, so all these things that happened was actually me being autistic and trying to move to the world without knowing it. And with time, you become more comfortable with it. You give yourself more compassion. You start to see it for the benefit that it is, and not, oh, woe is me, I'm broken. Like that's bullshit, bro. Pardon my French, but I don't believe in that, you know. But it's easy to see yourself as that. It's complicated, you know. Being human is hard. Life is ironic and funny sometimes painful, but it is what it is. And at the end of the day, it's not going to change a damn thing about who you are. You've been the same person your entire life. Now you just have a different framework to understand it. Freddie Gibbs.
Yeah. Amen to that. That's amazing. And I think that the point you make about, you know, the ableism that we kind of bring with us, and that baggage that we carry, sometimes we don't even realize we have it until, you know, somebody really confronts us and says, hey, you know, that it's really easy to bring about ourselves as well as, you know, about society as a whole. But I just wanted to come back to the point that you made about autistics being the real experts. And that is a great segue into our last 15 minutes, where we'd like to open it up to some questions from the audience. And I know we've got a kind of big group of people here, but I would just invite people, if you've got questions, to either put them in the chat, or we can try and use the raise hand function. I can't see everybody on my screen. So Jillian, I might need a little help with that if there are people that want to ask questions. And also, if there are folks in the Oromo and Somali language rooms that have questions, please let us know and we'll do our best to get those answered. So I see that Ryan has raised a hand. Ryan Chaddick. Ryan, do you want to go ahead and take your microphone, turn your microphone on?
Yes, thanks. I asked my question earlier in the chat, but like, I'll do it right now. Content warning, like racism and ableism. In my church denomination, there's an issue going on. And basically my question is, how do we hold white autistic folks accountable for actions that were experienced as racist by BIPOC communities when they believe they were following rule books and letters of law, but simultaneously ignored personal POC advice? Like, especially when the denomination holds ableist perspectives, partners with ABA providers, and like refers to disability as like falling short.
Starting off with a light question here.
Yeah, just
no, thank you for that, Ryan. Who wants to jump in on that one?
Nobody is unmuting. Okay, so here's what I have to say is that we need white allies to run interference here. We need white folks to jump in and be like, hey, dude, that's not okay. And you need to take the not you, like general you, white allies need to take the people who have perpetuated racism aside, out of the sight of people of color, to try and course correct and explain and do that emotional labor as much as they are able to. If a person of color was directly harmed, amends should be made, and however that needs to take place. Like there is a practice called Restorative Justice that is a good tool to use when it doesn't cause additional harm to people of color. And this is a conversation that I've had with my friend Jillian, who's monitoring the chat, and she's here tonight. But it is really the responsibility of white allies to make spaces safer for people of color. Like, that's what we need white allies to do.
Thank you, Jules. Let's see, do we have other questions here, or does anybody else want to add anything on to Jules' answer?
I just briefly, I'll touch on it. Sorry, Saeed again. Yeah, you know, one of the difficulties about being autistic is, again, that hyper-focus thing. I know in this whole, you know, the internal sense of right or wrong, I know there's been plenty of times when I've been wrong, but I felt like I was right and I really went with it. And then I hyper-focused on that and I followed it. And then after the fact, I would look back and be like, I probably should have listened to my friends when they were telling me, like, I needed to ease up a little bit. So that makes it difficult when we frame that with like white autistic racism. I get it. And then on top of that, like generally speaking, autistic or not, white racism is I don't like talking about it at this point. Like, it is what it is. But I don't know. I think that's work for their internal community that they need to do together. And my main focus is surviving, because as Freddie Gibbs said, my execution might be televised. So we're here, we're doing what we can, and they should too.
Thank you, Saeed. It looks like Sarah, did you have a question to ask?
Yes. So I am also autistic, but I am white passing. And I'm also a speech pathologist in a school. So I work with children with a variety of different abilities and, different levels of understanding. And so one of the things that, as I've explored neurodiversity more, I've wanted to help my students be comfortable not having to mask, but I also recognize that for people of color, that's not always, and that's not always something that can be done, and can also be very dangerous in a lot of situations for people of color if they are not masking. So I'm trying to figure out exactly how to navigate that with my students, because I want them to feel comfortable with who they are. But I also want to keep them safe. So kind of I'd love to know how your thoughts of how to have that conversation with students. And as a white passing person, where what I guess what would you suggest? How would you suggest that I say this, or what kind of is your perspective on that?
Delia, Jules, or Saeed, any of you want to jump in on that one?
That's a really important question, I've always thought that instructors should speak to the non-autistic or non-disabled students in the class about disability, about what autism is. Because as I say, a lot of people view autism negatively. But if from the beginning, an instructor teaches a student exactly what this is and enables them to understand what it is, it enables, for me, it would enable the students to empathize with the autistic children in that class and enable the autistic children to be themselves because they see people around them who understand that. But you have to be very, how can I put this? Sensitive, delicate about how you speak about it to the students, the non-autistic students. And I think, I'm sure that would help quite a lot. I don't know what Jules or Said would think about that. Now, I'm not saying no, I'm not saying to disclose who is autistic, but you speak generally about disability in the classroom. I think it's important. And you don't shy away from it. And that's the thing. Why shy away from disability? What are we hiding? Is that a form of ableism?
Jules, did you want to add something to that?
I do. So disclosure is like a really personal choice. And we all choose different things for ourselves. Some people are open books and some people are more private. And I am kind of a combination of the two of, I talk about a lot of stuff, but I also keep a lot of stuff private. And it's important to note that disclosure of a diagnosis is different for people of color, particularly, and women, especially mothers, because I believe it's in 44 different states that a person can lose custody of their children because of a disability, particularly if it's like a custody battle in a divorce court. Professionally, there can be ramifications. But then on the flip side, autistic people may not have the diagnosis autism, but people notice that there's something different. And they might not know what it is. But typically people notice that there's something different about this person. But basically, like, it's a really personal choice, and you have to weigh the benefits and risks for yourself as an individual. And we have to respect other people's choices for themselves.
Thank you for that, Jules. We're getting close to the end of our time here. And I, again, just want to say a huge thank you to our panelists, to Delia and to Jules and to Saeed. You have been so incredibly generous with your experience and, you know, personal details of your lives. And I'm so grateful for that. And I hope that everybody attending here is able to learn something from that and walk away with maybe a slightly different perspective about autism than when they came in. I'm really grateful to the Autism Society and to the Minnesota Autistic Alliance for helping us out here and coordinating with us to present this. And I'd like to end with one last question for our panelists, and that is, what's your favorite thing about being autistic? Saeed, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah. 1 second. China.com. Boom, boom, boom. My favorite thing about being autistic, I have a great time by myself. I don't need no friends. I love having friends, but I don't need people in my life. Like every day, I don't need to be in a crowd, and I don't have to text my friends. So what are we doing today? What do you guys want to do? I'm at the crib, dog. I'm by myself. I'm playing video games. I'm, you know what I mean, reading a recipe for a souffle that I will never bake. It's fantastic. I'm taking Sunday morning walks in the drizzle. It reminds me of home in Seattle, you know? And I'm noticing the first buds of flowers and leaves on the trees and plants in spring. And I'm noticing the seasonal migration of the blue herons. And I'm going to the same spot by the river that I watch them at every year when they come back. And I'm watching their babies grow up. And most people are too busy running around going from, oh, I gotta go to this event. Oh, I gotta go do that. I'm late for work. But we're all gonna die, bro. Most of us sooner than we expect. So I think my favorite part about being autistic is the fact that it forces us to, you know, the old cliche, stop and smell the roses. We always smell the roses, bro. We're always noticing and always aware of the subtle aspects of life that pass most people by. And I think that's really beautiful.
Thank you for that. Jules, do you want to go next?
Sure. My particular sensory experience includes happy bubbles. So when I'm super happy, I feel like I have bubbles in my belly and they just kind of like fizz up like soda and come out, and it like might jump or flap or something, but it's a really good feeling. And I feel sad for every neurotypical person or autistic person who will never experience happiness the way that I do, because it is such a deep happiness that like it's euphoric nearly. Like it's so great. Anyway, that's my favorite part.
That's awesome. Thank you, Jules. Delia, I'm going to give you the last word here.
My honesty, my attention to detail, the fact that I'm very structured, and I am not afraid to show how much I love life. And so if I feel like dancing somewhere where nobody wants to dance, Delia is going to dance. If I feel like laughing, oh, Delia is going to laugh. That's me. You know, in the song, this is me, the greatest showman. I am who I'm meant to be. This is me. And if I feel like singing, I will sing.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Delia. And again, thank you to everyone who joined us today. We're so grateful that you were joining us with this conversation, and we hope that you will take all these wonderful ideas and thoughts out into the world and share them with your communities as well. So thank you and good night.